Hi, I'm Gary Katz. I've been a finished carpenter for about 40 years. Over the last 20 years, I've been producing carpentry clinics, Katz Roadshow events for professional carpenters and contractors at lumber yards all over America. In 2005, I bought a Dodge Mercedes Sprinter to haul roadshow gear. I installed a winch and made custom carts and crates, so it was really easy to roll out and roll up all the sets and the AV equipment, the video stuff, the screen, the speakers, and all the tools too. But recently, I've decided to take a different road in life. And for that, I'm converting my Sprinter to a camper. I'll be sharing the whole process in a series of videos. If you're looking for an extreme makeover in 30 minutes or less, well, this ain't it. Well, today's the big day. Gonna pull all of the roadshow stuff out of my Sprinter and get started on the van conversion. Let's look at the tape measure so you can see the measurements that are seriously critical to laying out this van. First, obviously, you want the width on the inside. And the easiest thing to measure is this pre-cut flooring, the pre-cut panel that's inside here that we're gonna be taking out right away. 68 inches. 68 inches. In addition to the width, I want the length, and that's also the size of this pre-cut panel, because the pre-cut panel drops out just behind the seats. It ends just behind the seats, and that's the end of my build-out. 128 and a half inches. Now there's a few other dimensions we need too. Like I need to know how far is it from the same spot, the back of that aluminum strip, to the back of the wheel well. There, 22 inches. I need to know how far is it from the back of the strip to the front of the wheel well. It ends right here, 57. And how tall is the wheel well? It's just under probably 10 and a half inches. And how deep is it in this direction from the wall of the van? And if I measure right to the face of this piece of plywood, it's 9 inches. I want to be sure that I got a little bit of wiggle room here because I want everything to fit when I'm done. But I don't want to add in a lot of wiggle room because that'll take away from other features that I could add to the van. Now notice, I'm measuring off exactly the same spot. I'm hooking that tape measure right over that aluminum strip, and I'm pulling it all the way up to the front of the door right here. That's the first measurement I want to catch. Now, every van's going to measure differently, so don't take my measurements and use them for your van. You got to measure your van. So it's 88 inches to the back of the door opening. It's 127 and a half to the front of the door opening, and I can figure out what the actual opening is itself by subtracting those, but while I'm here, just to double check, it's 41 inches wide, the opening from the narrowest point. So I've got that measurement right here, 127 and a half and 88. Those are almost all the critical measurements I need other than the height. So this rib measures 72 3/4 to the bottom of the rib. And this one looks like it's a little lower. Yeah, just a little, 72 and a half. And remember, we're going to bring the height down some first. I'm going to bring the floor up when I insulate with 1 inch. So I'm going to lose an inch there. And then I'm going to put some wood backing on here before I put the 3/8 paneling on the ceiling. So I'm going to probably lose, an inch and a quarter off the top. So overall, I'm going to probably lose 2 1/4, maybe 2.5 inches. But that's just fine because I'm 5'7 and a half, and I'll never scrape the ceiling. And it doesn't hurt to double check this stuff like I did the width of the door. I got 49 3/4 between the wheel wells. 49 3/4. So you could get all of these measurements, not all of them, but you could get quite a few of them by subtracting one from the other, but try to avoid simple arithmetic whenever you can, because it's one of the areas that we tend to make mistakes. Again, as a finished carpenter, I have plenty of experience with that. So here I am at my desk. Not too many times I've done a video at my computer, but I want to demonstrate how I use Sketchup to create a really precise drawing, 3D drawing, three-dimensional, so that I can build something that's correct the first time, so that I can put all kinds of time and effort and imagination and creativity into the drawing and not have to try and work out crazy details after I've started cutting wood. Because whenever you do that, you end up doing stuff 2 or 3 times. And when you do stuff 2 or 3 times, even the second time, you lose your mood, you lose the joy, you lose the kind of like, ooh, this is fun kind of thing. You lose the present moment, and that's really important in construction. I don't know how many people have had this experience, but boy, if you're not, and I hate this phrase because it's overused so much, but if you're not in the moment when you're building stuff, then boy, you're going to make a lot of mistakes and you're not going to get a lot of fun or joy out of it. And that's the beauty of SketchUp. I have been using this program for over 15 years. I think I created my first video tutorial on how to build a bookcase. It must have been 12 or 13 years ago or more. I demonstrated how to use groups and components and how to run three-dimensional moldings around a bookcase. We're going to use, and I'm going to demonstrate some of the same techniques in this little illustration I'm going to do for how to start a drawing for the back of a van, for a van conversion. But I want you to understand how accessible this program is. That's one of the reasons I'm doing this. So the people that are watching this video won't be intimidated by SketchUp. This is a free program. Everybody should be using it, and with ease. It's not difficult. The version that I have is SketchUp Pro, and I'm on a Mac. So it's going to probably look different than the version you use, especially if you're using the free version. Or if you're using a PC, it's going to look different. And some of the commands and control features are a little bit different, but the program really operates the same way. The simple techniques that I'm going to focus on and concentrate on in this little video are going to be exactly the same no matter what version or what platform you're using it on. So let's get started with this. I want to create a floor plan drawing of my van. So let's start at the beginning here. These little icons right up here are kind of like representative of the view that you're looking for. Like in a set of plans, a set of drawings, when you look at the front of a home, and that little icon right there, you see underneath it, it comes up with a little drop-down message. It says front view. That's really what we call in the business, in the construction business, the elevation. That would be the front elevation. And then there's another elevation over here of the side and the back. And then next to the front elevation, there's a little icon of a roof with a chimney in it. So you're looking down on that, and that they call, in SketchUp, they call it the top view. And in our business, in construction, we call that the floor plan. And that's the view we want to use. So I'm going to click on that icon to make sure that the drawing view is correct for what we want to do here. And the first thing I want to do is I want to draw a rectangle that's exactly the shape of the, and size, precisely the size of the back of my van. So the back of my van is 68 inches wide and 128.5 inches long. So I'm going to use the rectangle tool, which is right here. You notice I move my select tool, my cursor, over to this part of the drawing. This is my tool palette. Your tool palette may be across the top of your drawing, or who knows, you may put it over here because you can move it around wherever you want. But I'm selecting the rectangle tool. As I hover over that tool, a little drop-down menu comes up, or a little message comes up, and it says that's the rectangle tool, and next to it, parenthetically in parentheses, it says R. That means R on your keyboard is the shortcut key for using the rectangle tool. So you don't have to use the cursor or your mouse to do that. But I'll do it right now. I'll click on the rectangle tool and I'll draw a rectangle. Now watch what happens as I'm drawing it. Notice how the dimensions in this dimension window change. As it gets bigger, that the dimensions get bigger. It gets, I mean, I could make it huge. I'm not going to try and drag this out to this exact size of my van, which is 68 by 128.5. That wouldn't be precise. I want to enter those dimensions right into this window. So it doesn't matter what size I make it. I'm going to enter in 68. You see how it's already started. And instead of the X key, I'm going to use the comma, because in Sketchup, that's what represents the X, like 68 by 128.5. So I'll enter the comma key, and then I'll type in 128.5 and enter. And that is the dimension of the back of my van. Oh, it looks like it got it wrong because I spent so much time talking. So let's start over again. I'm going to go back and hit the undo button. This is one of the most valuable keys in Sketchup. You just go back and it's gone. Whatever you did last, it just takes you right back to the position the drawing was in prior to that. So I'm going to go back to the rectangle tool. I'll pull this out again, and this time I'll do it without fooling around. 68, comma, 128.5. Oh, that's wrong. It entered in the numbers incorrectly. Let's do it again. 68, comma, 128.5. There we go. Now let's make sure that we got those dimensions correct. I'm going to use the little dimensional tool right here. I could press D because that's the shortcut key. It's in parentheses. I'll select that tool and I'll hover over this corner, click once, and then go down to the next corner and click again. And that means, and that allows me to pull out a dimension of 128.5. I'll do the same thing on the width here. I'll hover over that corner, click once, come over to this corner and hover for a second, click again, and that's 68. So it got the exact dimensions that I wanted, but the drawing's a little bit offset. I'd like it to be in the middle. Now, this is one of the valuable things about Sketchup that makes it work, and if you don't have a mouse with a scroll wheel, you won't be able to use the program at all. Because with the scroll wheel, if I move the scroll wheel, I can go in and out, zoom in and out on the drawing. And if I move my cursor over to this side of the drawing, I can zoom out now, and it'll move that illustration, that part of the drawing, all the way over to the center of the screen. Then I can put the cursor right on the drawing and zoom back in, and it's centered. And there's another way to do that too. If I have the illustration and it's way over on that side of the screen, I can actually hold down the Shift key, and now I'm going to use the scroll wheel in my mouse, but I'm going to also use the button that it is. It's a button as well. If I push down on it, it's a command button. So I'm going to push the Shift key, hold down the scroll wheel, and I can just slip that drawing right over to the center. And now we're ready to pull some really precise dimensions, because we need to know exactly where those wheel wells are. If I look at my rough drawing, the wheel well begins at 22 inches and it ends at 57. So I'm going to use another tool in SketchUp, another one that's super valuable. It's the tape measure tool. I'm going to click on it. It's right here, and you'll see as it says tape measure under it, and there's a T in parentheses. That's the shortcut key. So I'm going to hit the tape measure, and I'm going to pull a dimension. These are temporary guidelines that the tape measure tool creates, and you'll see how I use them. I'm going to measure off the back of the van, just like I did all the measurements when I took them up at the shop. I'm going to measure off the back of the van, and it doesn't matter where I pull that measurement to. I could pull it way up to here, because I'm going to type in 22. That's where it begins, and it sets that guideline right at 22 inches from the back of the van. Now I've got to pull another one. That's 57 inches to the front of the wheel well, and I'll type in 57, and it stuck that one right precisely where it needs to be. Now I've got to get one from the side, because that wheel well is 9 inches wide, so I'll type in 9 and enter. And the same on this side, 9 and enter. So I have positioned all the both wheel wells. Now let's talk about groups and components. In SketchUp, it's really important to isolate different parts of your drawing. You can't draw everything on top of each other, because if you do and you try to move it later, it'll really skew everything. It'll stick. Things will get stretched and squeezed, and it'll just turn into a big mess. And in addition to that, a lot of times when you're drawing something like the stiles for a cabinet or the balusters on a stair, they're all exactly the same. So you can draw one and make it a component and then just copy and move that component as many times as you want. And that way in the future, every time you edit or alter that one component, it alters them all simultaneously, which is just magical. In this case, I'm going to make the back of the van into a group because there's only one of the van. There's only one floor plan. So in order to make it into a group, I double click on it and then I right click with my mouse and I choose Make Group. So now that's a group. If I click over here, you'll notice that those blue lines disappeared, but if I click on that one time, it's all outlined in blue. That means it's a unique, separate part of my drawing. And now I want to do the same thing with these wheel wells. So I'm going to create the wheel wells first. I'm going to press R for the rectangle tool, and I'm going to create a rectangle right here for the first wheel well. And then I press the space bar so I can use the select tool again and double click on that little rectangle of the wheel well and right click to make a component. Now you get the component window when it comes up. You can enter in the name of the component if you want to. I could type in wheel well right now. And it's kind of handy because later on, if you want to identify that part or that piece in your drawing, you can put a tag on it or a label on it, and it'll automatically enter the correct name for that tag. But you don't have to do this. But one thing you do have to do is you have to make sure that this little square right here is checked. If it's open, if it's clear like this, and you click on create, you won't be creating anything. I don't understand why they have this, but make sure that that little box is checked and then click on create. And now I've created a component out of that wheel well. And here's the cool thing. I'm going to take that component and I'm going to move a copy of it over to this side of the van. In order to do that, I need the move tool. So I'm going to use this tool right here. As I hover over it, it says move/copy, and it has in parentheses M. So the M is the shortcut key. So it doesn't move a copy automatically. You have to tell it that you want to move a copy. So I'm going to click on that tool, and I'm going to come down here to this corner because I'm going to want to move a copy of this wheel well over to this side. And in order to move a copy, I have to hit the Option key real quick. Now on your computer, it might be the Control key. Might be a little bit different, but you don't have to hold it down. You just have to hit it once, and I'll be able to take that part of the drawing, that component, and drag it right over to the other side. That's pretty cool. Now I've got both wheel wells in. If I change one of them, it'll change them both, and I'll show you what I mean in just a minute. But right now, we've got some more really important lines, guidelines to put in with the tape measure tool. I want to know where that door starts, where the opening for the sliding door is, and where the front of it is too. Here's the back of that door. Here's the front of it up here. So the back of it is 88 inches from the rear of the truck. So I'm going to press T for the tape measure tool, and I'm going to pull a line up here anywhere I want, and then hit 88, enter. So that's the back of the door. And then I need another one for the front. So we'll go way up here, and it's 127.5, 127.5. You could enter in fractions too by just pushing the slash key, but 0.5 is much quicker. And there's the front of that door. Now down the road, pretty quick here, I'm going to eliminate all of these tape measured lines, all of the little dimensional lines that I've put in the guidelines. I'm going to eliminate all of them because they get confusing. The guidelines are really useful, but boy, you want to get rid of them as soon as you can. And once I do get rid of them, I won't know where this door is. So I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to take the line tool. And to get the line tool, I did it quickly. I did it automatically. I just pushed L on my keyboard without telling you. To get the line tool, you just hit this icon right here, which is the line tool. And if you hover on it, you'll see it'll say line tool and in parentheses L. L is the shortcut. So I'm going to take a little line, and I'm just going to draw it right where that guideline is, just a little short line, and I'll press escape so it won't keep drawing lines. And then I'm going to do another one down here, and that's it. And look, if I keep going, it'll draw another line, so I'm going to press escape again. So I've got those two lines right where I want them. And I'll zoom back out so I can see the whole drawing again. And now I can get rid of all of those tape measure lines that we put in, the guidelines. Now I have a control on my computer, a custom keyboard, a custom keyboard shortcut that I created that will eliminate and erase all of those guidelines by pressing Control X on my computer. And you can do this on yours too. You can use your mouse and one of the menu controls, whichever way you want to do it. But now that I've gotten rid of all those guidelines, I can get into what we really want to do here, start going into 3 dimensions. Now to do that, I want to change the view to an isometric view. And I'm going to press down the wheel button on my mouse, hold it down, while I move my mouse, and it'll change the drawing from floor plan to an isometric view. I can roll this over even more. And I want to start going into 3 dimensions. So the best example here is, how do you lift those wheel wells from a flat 2-dimensional plane to a 3-dimensional drawing? Well, I'm going to take this one and select it. In order to select it, you can click on the select tool right here, or you can press the space bar. So now I've got the select tool, and I'm going to double click on that component. You could also right click and choose edit component. It would be exactly the same thing. So if I do edit a component, it's going to open it up and prepare it for editing. Now I'm going to use the push-pull tool. This is the tool you use to change a 2-dimensional drawing into a 3-dimensional drawing. And here it is right there. If I hover on it, it says push-pull and P in parentheses. So I'll hover over this drawing, I'll click on the push-pull tool, and then I'll come over here and I'll take this section of the drawing and lift it up. Now that wheel well is 10.5 inches tall. Is this cool? I could make it 40 feet tall if I wanted to. All I have to do is press in 10, and it automatically sets it at precisely 10 inches tall. And you noticed, since these are components, if I change one, it automatically changes the other. And those are the 2 primary ways to isolate parts of your drawing. Like I said, groups and components. And components are incredibly useful. So now let's look at the drawing that I did to start my plan for my van. And this is it. This is my original floor plan for the van. I've got the dimensions in here, the 128 and the 68. And you'll notice from looking at this that I initially had a totally different floor plan in mind. This is what I was thinking of. I was going to put the shower up near the front, which is what I noticed most people did with their van conversions. And then I was going to build a bench seat here and put a chest refrigerator in. And I really need a porta-john because I have Crohn's disease and an ileostomy. So I was going to put the porta-john right back here underneath the bed. I started looking into this and I realized, wow, the refrigerator is going to be really tight. The chest refrigerator is going to be really tight to the wheel well. Then I started thinking about that and I thought, gosh, every time I need to get inside that refrigerator, I'm going to have to lift up the seat for the bench and then lift up the lid for the refrigerator. And then I discovered when I started drawing it in 3 dimensions that the seat would have to hinge all the way back at the wall in order to get the refrigerator lid to lift open. The whole thing started turning into a nightmare, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to be better off with a regular upright refrigerator. So I changed my whole plan. I moved the refrigerator to this area here, made it an upright refrigerator. I moved the shower from here right up to the bed so I could take the bench seat and put it right behind the seat of my truck, which is real handy because it makes it into a much kind of more comfortable place to sit and work at a computer or to eat. And it makes it a really nice dog bed, and that's important. That'll be right behind the driver's seat. So this is what my final kind of view in 3 dimensions looks like in Sketchup. You can see my bench seat. There's the kitchen area. There's the bed in the back and the upper cabinets. I got a lot of help on this drawing from Todd Murdoch. He helped me by helping create these final textures for the beadboard. He helped me by creating some dynamic components I'll show you in a minute. And he really helped me with 2 tabs in this drawing. across the top, you'll notice that all of these little tabs are actually different views that I've saved. So you can go to that view automatically, which is really handy. This one is the shell on, which is what we're seeing here. This one is if you want to work on the drawing and you need the shell off. That way you can reach inside and change something or access part of the drawing without having the shell in your way. Because truly, it's just like working, in the shop or something. If the shell is on, you can't reach through the outside of the van and start changing part of the drawing. You just can't, because it's just like real. It's three-dimensional. This way the shell is off and you can do whatever you want. But with the shell on, let's look at the inside. Here's what the interior looks like. You can see the refrigerator, what I hoped would be a drawer underneath it, because you need storage space. It turned out that I wouldn't be able to do that, because that's where I ended up putting the water tank for the fresh water. But this shows you kind of like where I'm putting switches and the table that I wanted to put in. And here's another tab for the electrical. It shows you the lights across the ceiling and the light fixtures underneath the cabinets and all of my sensors and switches and outlets and stuff like that. All of that's part of the planning that you've really got to put time into. I mean, you might be into just dreaming about your van conversion, and that's cool. Sketchup is an awesome way to exercise your dream. But if you're going to turn that dream into reality, you really need that drawing, and you need to have spent time and creativity and patience on getting that drawing right in a three-dimensional illustration before you cut any wood. So let's look at a good example of what I'm talking about. This table, I wanted to make this top once, and I wanted to locate the hardware for this Lagoon table in exactly the right place so that it would rotate all the way around. It would store inside of the shower, and I could bring it around to sit at when I'm sitting on the bench seat, or when I use a computer, or I could store it over the bench seat as well. So I made sure in SketchUp that my location for mounting that hardware would work, and that the size of that tabletop would be right and would work too. Let's take a look at the kitchen. These are all examples of what you can achieve with SketchUp in a three-dimensional drawing. If I take a really closer look at this cabinet and go right inside of it, you'll see the wheel well. It actually sticks into the cabinet. Well, that's cool. It's not going to get in the way, but at least I know it's going to be there. So I know what kind of space I have in that cabinet. A lot of this is so handy to know. Now let's look at the toilet and the seat a little bit. Here's the porta-john that's inside this cabinet. And if I click on this view, you'll see the door open, and we'll see that the porta-john's on a drawer that slides out of that opening. I learned a really good lesson with SketchUp. When I first slid that drawer out of there, the drawer actually hit the door. It would have been a total rebuild if I hadn't done the drawing. Let's look at this a little closer and I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to go back to the previous tab and zoom in on this. Here it is. And here's the drawer guide right here, this gray thing. And here behind it is the backing I have to install to make sure that drawer guide is proud of the face frame enough inside the opening of the face frame so when the drawer itself comes out, it doesn't hit this door. And this drawing helped me define precisely the size of this pull-out drawer before I built anything. Let's look at a couple other things too. Here's the view of the back of my kitchen cabinet, and coming around the side of it, you can see my propane tanks. Now, the propane tanks are kind of funny. Initially, I thought that I'd just have the propane tank sitting loose in the back underneath the bed. And I read up on that, and I found out, gee, that's illegal. If there's a propane leak, you're dead. So I created a propane locker. At first, I was just going to do one tank. And then I started thinking about it. And I thought, wow, what if you're going off on a trip and that propane tank is like a quarter full or a third full or an eighth full, and you don't really know. So you're going to be tempted to run down to the propane shop and get a new tank. It may be half full, but you're going to waste whatever gas is in it. So I thought to myself, no, have two tanks. One of them that'll be hooked up, and one of them that'll either be full or empty. I mean, If I have a full tank, I can take the one that's hooked up and drain it, use it until it's drained empty, and then slide the fresh one in and take the empty one as soon as I get a chance and replace it. Get an exchange. So there's the propane locker, and I built that with a vent, a drain in the bottom of it that drains out through that wheel well. Propane's heavier than air, so any leak that occurs inside the propane locker, that gas will drain right out through the bottom of the van. Right next to the propane locker, I put my water heater. I really wanted instant hot water, and that's one of the reasons I went for propane. It was just so I could have an instant water heater. But I'm also using the propane for my cooktop and for my furnace, which is at the front of the van. And that's why we wanted to locate the propane tanks on the same side as the cooktop and the water heater. Everything in line, so the plumbing's a lot easier. Originally, I planned to put the solar electrical system on this side of the van. So at one point, I actually, and I've watched, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to push the move key, and I'll take this whole batteries and inverter kit and slide it over to this side of the van, because this is what it looked like originally. And if you look at the original two-dimensional floor plan that I did, that's exactly the side it was on. But if you notice, since I moved it, it's in the wrong direction. It's like backwards because it's open on this side. So when you move something like this, it's just another quick lesson. You can right-click on it and you can flip it. So down here it says flip along, and I'm going to flip it along the red axis. So right there, I'm going to flip it, and it turned it back around. So that's the outside. It's really kind of cool. So that's not where it's ended up. So I'm going to put it back where it was just by pushing the undo key up here, the undo button, and it'll go right back to the other side. Now you can see my water tank underneath the refrigerator up above it, and the height of the water tank determined how high the refrigerator had to be installed, and the height of the refrigerator determined how high the bed had to be. So every single thing that's going on back here relates and has an impact on everything else. And this is something that's really common in construction, but particularly in a job that's as complex and complicated as the back of a van when you're converting it to a camper. There are so many things back here compressed in one small space that you wouldn't even want to think about trying this from the seat of your pants. You really want a drawing. So the purpose of this video is to convince you that Sketchup is a really simple program to learn how to use. You just have to put a little effort into it, and the payoff is huge. You'll be able to do stuff right the first time. And don't abandon your drawing. Like, listen closely. According, like the military, they always say you got to have a plan, but as soon as combat starts, you throw your plan out the window. Well, in a way, that happens with construction too, because you end up running up against unknowns that change things. But that doesn't mean you abandon your plan. You modify your plan. You update your plan every single time you make a change, so that when the time comes to start building cabinets, your plan has been updated for any other changes you've made, and you can use your plan, your drawing, to come up with exact cabinet dimensions for parts, for styles, for rails, for the top, the bottom, the sides, everything, and build that cabinet so it fits perfectly when you slide it into that opening. And that is the value of Sketchup. I cannot stress this enough. It allows you to see into the future for free. All it takes is a few minutes of your time.